Hey guys, it's Luminostic. Just decided to pop back on because I realized that I left out some information from the last part of the stream that I felt was really relevant and important to the subject. So I'm back, and please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon because I'm demonetized and I don't get any support otherwise. Also, grassroots efforts sharing my videos are the only way that they're going to get around. So please do that for me. Okay, so in the last video, I talked about kind of the basis for really enriching your mind and setting the stage for rapid growth and how to catalyze it, and some practices that you can do. And, you know, that sort of thing. And so, I realized that I hadn't. Nice, man. I realized that I hadn't offered this antidote that is really, really important, because if you successfully catalyze your consciousness, you will find that you have experiences that can be confusing and overwhelming without proper critical thinking and, you know, caution and good objectivity. And so if you guys remember back to the Hermes, the Poimandres, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but basically Hermes Trismegistus encounters this dragon made of light, and the dragon symbolizes the universe. And if you think about it, a dragon is a serpent and it has a forked tongue, right? And it's not just this myth. There's a lot that goes into the reasons why the serpent and dragon symbolism is so ubiquitous around the world. But sorry, I keep getting distracted by these numbers because it says 0, but then the likes is going up. So I guess it's just wrong. So this dragon of light comes and tells Hermes all of the, you know, secrets of initiated thinking, basically. But so the takeaway from that is that the universe is basically a forked-tongued serpent. And if you consider any experience that you have that might fall under the category of metaphysical or parapsychological, it's really tempting sometimes to just jump on a conclusion, you know, because everyone wants to believe that we live forever. At least most people do. You know, death is the great uncertainty and the great fear of most of humanity, it seems. And that uncertainty can be confronted and processed a little bit by not just psychedelic experiences, but transcendental experiences in general. And so, you know, aside from that, the reality is that if you analyze experiences that you have, you're always going to come to two possibilities. In my experience, you're never able to just resolve these questions. And so I'll give you an example. The question of reincarnation. I had a whole string of experiences that proved conclusively that I had access to information that I couldn't have through normal means. And it suggested very strongly that I was the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley, right? But if you think this through a little bit, you come up with all of these alternative explanations. I could be the reincarnation of a person that had studied him in a past life. It could be that there is a collective reservoir of information that's shared by everyone and that we can sometimes access, the collective unconscious. It could be that I have an ancestral link, and so I was able to access those memories through a common ancestor. So that element of spiritual exploration and metaphysical study is so important that you always have to seek out an alternative explanation for anything that you experience, any bit of information that you find, and completely exhaust all the alternatives before falling on a conclusion. And one of the reasons for that is that belief is the death of intelligence, because the seeking, the searching, it stops. The weary pilgrim wanders onwards. The satiated pilgrim rests. So it's just absolutely essential that you have the detachment and the neutrality and the objectivity. Even if, you stumble upon something that you really want to believe and you're really heavily invested in it, you have to have the constitution and the wherewithal and the presence of mind to seek out every possible alternative explanation until you have absolutely exhausted all possibilities before you accept anything. There's also the possibility of sheer coincidence. And this is something that people, I think, don't really consider in a lot of these circumstances. Because if you really think about the sheer quantity of information, of signals that we're receiving from the universe at any given time, I don't remember the exact number, but it is astronomically fucking huge. It's massive, right? So the chances that somewhere in those signals, there's going to be some meaningful coincidences of a high order of improbability, very high potentially. And it's very easy for us to believe that one of these synchronicities has more meaning than it actually does. And, bear in mind that I'm not saying synchronicities don't have meaning. I've experienced some crazy shit along those lines. But I'll give you an example from my experience that seems like it's beyond the possibility of coincidence, but it isn't. At one point in my, awakening phase, when things got really, really intense, I decided that I wanted to talk to Danny Carey, the drummer from Tool. So I told my friends, I'm going to prove to you guys that I have accessed capacities of consciousness that are normally dormant, or at least, often dormant. And I'm going to go find Danny Carey, but I'm not going to stalk him. I didn't look online to see where he was. None of that stuff. I literally drove right to him. And I was going to go by myself, but my girlfriend, Spider Monkey, came running out and threw herself on my legs. And I literally dragged her 1 foot free to the car and ended up taking her and my dog. And there was a whole string of circumstances that make this increasingly improbable. We were stuck in Vegas for 3 days, and we just happened to get the gas money, to go the rest of the way all of a sudden. And that doesn't seem that weird until you realize that I arrived in LA about 15 minutes before Danny Carey walked into the back door of this bar. And so we pulled up behind the bar. The owner comes out and he says, Danny Carey's going to be here in a little while. And that's the first thing he said to us, and I just looked at her like, what in the hell? And so we go and we wait, and he comes and walks in the door. And then we drive around the other side of the building because we had to park somewhere else, I guess. They asked us to move. And I walk up to the door, and the admission is exactly to the penny the amount of money that I have in my pocket. Exactly. So I go in and sit down and watch the set, which was the keyboard player from one of Frank Zappa's bands, and Danny on drums, and some guitar player that I really didn't, just kind of mindless shredding. I didn't really think much of it. But then he gets up and he takes his drum, and it was an open mic at a place called the Baked Potato, and he gets up and walks out, and people are kind of yelling at him, Danny's kind of ignoring everyone. And I walked up to him and said, "Hey, Danny, can I talk to you in the privately, away from the crowd?" Which is, of course, a huge red flag. I thought for sure he was just going to be fuck off, man. Why are you bothering me? But he was super cool. He went over into the alley a little bit with me, and we talked for about 20 minutes. And the subject matter is not really relevant to the story. You guys can watch the video I made about it. But the thing about that is, this story doesn't just suggest that I was able to use some kind of psychic capacity to locate this guy and go and talk to him. The fact that we were stuck in Vegas for exactly the length of time that resulted in us arriving there a few minutes before Danny Carey suggests that there was something higher mitigating circumstances. But regardless of how insane that story is, the possibility that it was absolutely sheer coincidence is still present. It's not negated by the improbability of it all. And then this is, of course, something that will drive you mad. It can definitely instigate a existential crisis to think too much about this stuff. But if you're me or anyone like me, you don't really have much choice. It's just kind of what you do. And you know that it comes even back to the idea of a creator, you know, chicken or the egg kind of thing. One of the reasons that I hesitated to believe in anything like that when I was younger and still is that, you know, the chances that all of these coincidences, all of the coincidences in aggregate that would have to happen, and this is the part people don't really think about when you're talking about evolution or evolution of the universe. It's not just that we have to have all these coincidences in aggregate. The timing also has to be very perfect. You know, if you think about the complexity of our biological systems and how things are interdependent, how did the human baby survive before the mother developed breast milk? And, you know, how many random mutations were there before there were actually ducts for the milk to flow through? And you know what I mean? And is it a coincidence? I guess it's a random mutation that the woman happens to have the feeders as well as the, you know what I mean? It's and then if you think about the fact that we have so many interdependent organs, you know, it's just, it seems to me that what science has done is they've found the map. They found the mechanistic blueprint of how all these things work and how it happened. But it doesn't actually provide a satisfactory explanation. The thing is, though, and this is what we have to bear in mind, and this is the most difficult thing about metaphysics and this kind of subject matter, I guess. Even though it seems completely insane and improbable to attribute it all to coincidence, it totally could be. You know, and we just have to kind of learn to live with the reality of not knowing. That is the most fundamentally important thing, to have a real healthy spiritual development. Because as soon as dogma enters the picture, as soon as you become absolutely resolutely sure about something that you cannot know, you have become either insane or a fool. And, you know, for most people, it's just too tall of an order. They feel like they have to know. And that's just not how the universe is. The universe is basically a question. It is a bunch of probabilities and possibilities, some of which occur and some of which do not. And, you know, there's just no real way to have certainty about really anything. I mean, if you guys have watched my videos on synchronicity, I've experienced so many extraordinarily weird things that, you know, dismissing them with coincidence seems preposterous, like even more preposterous than believing that some sort of, you know, parapsychological phenomena is responsible. But I have to admit always that sheer coincidence could be the culprit. For example, on another occasion, I was working on a deck, and it had an overhang, and there was plywood, and behind it was fiberglass. And my girlfriend called me and told me she had just photographed bears in a tree. And so I said, "Oh, well, that's great, but I'm working. I got to go." But I had her on speakerphone because I was working, and all the guys I was working with heard it. And so I pulled the insulation out. Bear claws, 3 of them fell on the deck, and the first thing out of my mouth was that those have to be like parrot talons or something. There's no fucking way that just happened. And one of the guys I was working with walked over. He was a hunter, and he's like, "Those sure as shit are bear claws. I just shot one a couple of days ago." And indeed, I had eaten bear meat at his house for the first time a few days before. It was probably the bear he was talking about. So, and here's another bit of wisdom for you. I don't really necessarily believe that that's coincidence exactly, but it's also important to bear in mind that impossible things don't happen. Those bear claws did not coagulate out of nothingness just because I was in a place in my life where I needed to experience these synchronicities in order to grow. That's not what happened. So for every manifestation, there's some kind of causal chain, right? Shit happens because of something real. You know what I mean? It all has to have some kind of mechanistic basis. This is what people don't understand about magic. Every single phenomena that occurs on this plane has some kind of thing, some kind of mechanistic basis that facilitates it. Magic is real, but impossible things don't happen. And this is why so many fools fail at magic, because they're trying to do this impossible shit that just can't happen. But so what I'm getting at, though, is that there's some kind of explanation for it all. For example, that time that I decided I wanted to go talk to Danny Carey and drove right to him, the possibility is that we are connected to all of the information in the universe, and sometimes we're able to access it through unconventional means. It seems sporadic to me. I've never seen a single person, nor am I aware of any in human history, and believe you me, I have looked, that is consistently able to do this stuff. I do it from time to time. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I have telepathic links with certain people that I'm absolutely 100% positive are real. There's just no fucking way. Like, my friend that invited me to Egypt, I literally knew the moment he decided that he was going to do that. It popped into my head. I was down by the river gold panning, and I was just like, that's a weird ass thought. I mean, how random is that? You know what I mean? And sure enough, the next day he sent me a message and said, what would you say if I asked you to go to Egypt with me? What do you think I would say? You know what I mean? And it was the second time that week that he had mentioned something. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was thinking the other day that I think it was that if these DMT entities are objectively real or if they are archetypal projections or something." And the answer is actually both, which is, I think that's correct somehow, paradoxically. But if you guys haven't noticed, the paradox doesn't stop things from existing. You know what I mean? There's plenty of impossibly paradoxical manifestations in the universe. In fact, I think that paradox is structurally imbued in everything. Everything contains its contradiction, right? That's one way we hear this expressed. The yin-yang symbol demonstrates it with the little bit of white inside of the black and the little bit of black inside of the white. If you hadn't hit the like button, you should hit the like button. Also, you guys, don't forget to comment on my videos, please. I'm doing everything I can to battle back against the shadow banning. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video, but I did test it in a number of ways. And a video I loaded on my channel that got relatively few views got 127,000 on a channel that hasn't been blacklisted. After it's already been posted on the internet, and they actually deprioritize things that are just totally copied. And so anyways, I'm going to do at 1 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to do a live stream where I'm going to really show everyone, how it is that I can prove that I've been, except, aside from the fact that they told us this. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. I was going to make another example of, how we have to really critically, I was explaining the bear claws, right? So I get a call about bear claws. I hang up the phone, bear claws fall out of the insulation that I pull out, 3 of them on the deck. That's like so insane that it just absolutely should not ever happen. But the explanation for it probably, and this is really important if you have these experiences, to think it through, like, how did this actually happen? And I was living in a place where there were tons of Ute people in Navajo. Dene, they would call themselves. But I figured out that it's pretty much a certainty that Native American custom to bless the house in some way by placing the bear claws in there and then sealing it up. That is without a doubt how those bear claws got there. The fact that they were exposed with the timing that they did when I was in the middle of, a string of synchronicities that all had related meanings. And of course, you're going through an awakening process. What is a bear synchronicity? Awakening, right? I actually asked my Dene friend, listen to what happened, man. What do you think of that? And he said, well, to us, the bear is a symbol of awakening because it hibernates. And so it's like, well, shit. I mean, that seems to be what's happening. So, and of course, I don't want to tell all these stories over and over again on my channel, but the ruler with 2 11s on it was like the day before. We were talking about the number 11, and my girlfriend was drawing on the floor, and she noticed that the ruler was messing with her because it had 2 11s on it. She's like, what is going on? And then, we're in the middle of a conversation about the mystical properties of 11, and the physical fucking ruler that she has 2 11s on it, and that can't be a misprint. That's not how that works. They're made in a mold. So the only way for that to happen would be that the mold was wrong, and they literally made, whatever, hundreds of thousands of these incorrect rulers. It's mind-boggling to think, that these circumstances had to arrange themselves as they did in order for these things to, manifest when they did. But again, I am not willing to invoke some supernatural agency to explain that. I don't think that the ruler just magically reconfigured itself for that moment. The explanation is that the mold was made incorrectly or something. Again, it doesn't negate the value of the experience or the meaning of the experience, but I think it is really important to stay grounded and to remember that there's always some kind of explanation. Telepathy, long-range telepathy, I'm still a little bit out to lunch on an explanation for that. Because when people are near each other, picking up the brain waves of another person does not seem out of question at all. Not by a heap or a lump or a smidgen. But when it happens from across the continent, my partner and I would have this happen a lot. When I first met her, I flew back to the United States and she remained in Ecuador. And I would think some kind of question that we hadn't even kissed yet. Like, these questions made no sense at all to be thinking or answering, because we weren't even dating. Like, nothing had happened. But I was sitting on the deck at my stepfather's sister's house, and I thought, I wonder what she thinks about marriage. And I went upstairs and my phone had a message from her saying that I feel differently about marriage since I've met you. We'd known each other for 5 days or something. So almost the moment that I had the question, I received the answer from thousands and thousands of miles away. Entrainment could be an answer. And actually, if what ayahuasca told me about, twin flames, which I guess we could talk about that. It's kind of interesting, is true, then it actually makes sense that our minds would be entrained. So what, and remember, I've never looked up twin flames. I have no idea what it is that people actually mean when they say it, like the pop culture version of this. But my conception of it was basically that in the beginning, there was nothing. Nothing made a bad bargain and became conscious. And that destroyed its unity. It's awareness itself that caused duality. And the first thing that happened was replicated by means of reflection. So once the one thing divided into two, as it continued to reproduce itself, all of these spheres of androgynous consciousness split in half, and there was a male part and a female part. And you could also think of it as like God and devil, or all the antinomies that you could possibly imagine, but every soul divided. And so somewhere in the universe, the other half of every single individual soul exists somewhere, and she was my other half. And so if that's the case, then our energy was literally intertwined, inextricably intertwined by entrainment. So, you know, it's quite normal for me to have or explainable for me to have a thought, and for her to answer it. And honestly, it could have been simultaneously that I thought the question and the answer happened simultaneously, because that's how it would happen with entrainment. I've had a number of those experiences where it's absolutely undeniable that the person was legitimately telepathically connected to me. Another girl did it from a mile away in a situation where she knew every single word of an entire 10-minute period, everything I looked at, exactly what I did, and she was definitely on a mountain at least a mile away. So these things definitely occur, and I guess the main bullet point of this presentation and the real reason for the live stream is that, it's really important, I think, to not accept any of this kind of stuff unless you are absolutely positively certain, because it's dangerous territory, and I say this a lot on this channel that, I don't just rail against the New Age movement because I'm a dick. I might be a dick, but I'm also trying to help. And, believing in precognition, wish demons, you know what I mean? It's without training and practice and wisdom, which unfortunately can't really be shared. It's very difficult to just share wisdom with someone verbally. It really has to be accrued by experience. And the rain is getting too loud for me to continue. So I hope this was helpful to you guys somehow. I didn't... Did I cover everything I was planning? Let's see. I talked about Hermes and the forked tongue and how everything splits into two possibilities, and there's never any possible resolution. And yeah, I think I'm satisfied with this. And plus, I can't hear myself think anymore. So please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams or send millions of dollars to Zelle, PayPal, or the cryptocurrency address, which you'll find in the descriptions of my videos. And I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m.